Hello, everybody. Mr. Lipchick here, and we're going to talk about levels of world economic development. You often heard the terms on the news, less developed countries, industrialized countries. We're going to get into that and talk about why these types of classifications exist and, what they actually mean. Okay, countries in the world have different developmental levels. Development is the process by which a nation improves the economic, political, and social well being of its people. A developed nation is a nation with a higher average level of material well being. Examples are the US, Great Britain, Australia, and Japan. A lesser developed country, or LDC, is a nation with a low level of material well being. And while a nation's level of development is not an indication of cultural superiority or inferiority, it is a measure of how healthy, productive, and educated and prosperous that nation is. The primary measure of the economic development of a country is its per capita GDP. Per capita gross domestic product, or per capita GDP, is a nation's gross GDP divided, or gross domestic product divided by its total population. A country may have a large GDP, a very large GDP, but a very small per capita GDP. Per capita GDP is an indication of how much of a nation's population is employed outside of agriculture. And limitations to this measurement include the fact that it does not account for differences in the distribution of income between members of a society. A wealthy elite could control most of the nation's GDP. That is, the rich could benefit primarily from the work of the nation's poor. Energy consumption is another measure of economic development in that it reflects a nation's level of industrialization. Industrialization is the extensive organization of an economy for the purpose of manufacture. High levels of energy consumption indicate high levels of industrialization, while low levels indicate low levels of industrialization. Nations with lower per capita energy consumption tend to have populations primarily engaged in subsistence agriculture. Subsistence agriculture is defined as a level of farming in which a person raises only enough food to feed his or her family. When most of a nation's workforce is devoted to subsistence agriculture, there are very few people available to work in industry. There are very few opportunities for workers to specialize in the making of consumer goods for sale. And with no specialized goods for sale, these economies cannot generate cash for reinvestment. The number of consumer goods manufactured per capita is a measure of economic development. It shows that people have the money to meet their basic needs with some left over for non-essential goods, like the ones you see to the right. For example, TVs, cars, washing machines, phones, etc. Okay, literacy is another level, and there is a literacy map with the percentages to your right. Okay, as you can see, there are various parts of the world with high literacy rates and parts with very low rates, and that has a tremendous impact on development. Okay, and this is the proportion of the population over 15 that can read and write. Okay, most often, the more of a country's citizens that attend school, the higher its level of development. And literate populations are usually more productive in both manufacturing and agriculture. Also, life expectancy, the average expected lifespan for an individual. People living in developed nations usually have much longer life expectancies than those in LDCs because of better diet, shelter, healthcare, and sanitation. Okay. Another measure is infant mortality rate. Okay, the number of deaths that occur in the first year of life per thousand live births. If you take a look, the United States does not rank number one, even though people come from all over the world to experience our medical healthcare miracles. We are not number one in infant mortality. Nevertheless, our infant mortality is much lower than, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa, okay, or India. Okay, the infant mortality rate is a measure of economic development in that it illustrates a country's level of health care and nutrition, which tend to be very low in lesser developed countries. Some characteristics of developed nations are high per capita GDPs, but most of the population are neither rich nor extremely poor. There is a higher degree of political and economic freedom in nations such as these. Consumer spending is higher, and agricultural output is higher because of advanced technology and farming techniques. And only a small portion of labor is needed to farm, freeing other people up to develop new and better, methods of governing, producing, giving services, and so forth. Developed nations have have been urbanized for many generations, giving most of their populations the location of living in the city. And along with urban growth, the infrastructure has expanded in developed nations. And that refers to things such as, bridges, trains, things that are needed for an economy to function, such as the ones listed there, power plants and so forth, hospitals. Characteristics of less developed nations. Less developed nations have lower per capita GDP. Unemployment is usually high, around 20%. And there's not enough time or money available for most families to purchase consumer goods. And less developed nations have fewer resources for educating their populations. And the need for children to help in agriculture limits the time that they can spend in school. And the literacy rates in LDCs are very low, often below 50%. There are stages in economic development when countries move from a lesser developed country to an industrialized country. First, there is a primitive equilibrium stage where there is no formal economic organization or monetary system. The economy is based simply upon tradition. There's a transition phase where cultural traditions begin to be replaced as people develop new living patterns and interact with other economies. There's the takeoff phase where the new industries grow and profits are reinvested. There's a semi-development stage where economies expand significantly and enter the international market. And a highly developed phase where the basic human needs are easily met and the economy is focused on consumer goods and public services. Okay, that concludes our discussion of the levels of economic development. Thank you for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great day.